A starving girl begs for expired bread outside a bakery, clutching her sick mother's hand. When the ruthless Mafia boss notices his stolen family ring, worth millions and tied to his murdered father, glinting on her trembling finger, everything stops. How did a desperate child end up with the one thing he's been hunting for 3 years? The answer will shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty, betrayal, and the night his world burned down. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. Rain hammered the streets of Chicago in sheets that turned the asphalt into black mirrors. Victor Kane stood behind the tinted windows of his penthouse office in the Loop, watching the city lights blur and refract through the downpour. The sound was relentless, a drumming that never quite let him think clearly, though he'd grown used to operating through noise. 34 years old, he wore his authority like the tailored charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders without a wrinkle. Sharp, expensive, unforgiving. His dark hair was swept back, still damp from the rain he'd walked through earlier, and his eyes held the particular emptiness of a man who'd seen too much and felt too little. The office smelled of leather and old wood, the kind of scent that came from furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. Victor's desk was clean, except for a single glass of whiskey, untouched, and a silver lighter he turned over and over between his fingers. It had been his father's. The motion was unconscious now, a tic he'd developed in the 3 years since the old man died, since he was murdered. "The shipment clears the port tomorrow night," said Marcus, his second in command, standing near the door with his hands clasped in front of him. Marcus was older, graying at the temples, with the careful posture of someone who'd learned when to speak and when to disappear. No complications. The cops we owned stay bought. Victor didn't turn from the window. And the Italians? Quiet. They're still licking their wounds from last month. Wounded dogs bite, Marcus. Yes, sir. The rain intensified, and Victor finally turned, setting the lighter down with a soft click. His gaze swept over Marcus with the same cold assessment he gave everyone, measuring loyalty, calculating risk. Trust was a currency he spent carefully, and even Marcus, who'd served his father for 20 years, only got so much. "Double the guards anyway," Victor said. "I want eyes on every access point. If someone so much as looks at those containers wrong, I want to know before they blink twice." Marcus nodded and left without another word. The door closed with a whisper of expensive hinges, and Victor was alone again, with the rain and the city, and the weight of an empire built on blood and fear. He picked up the whiskey, finally, and drank it in one swallow. The burn was familiar, grounding. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena, his sister. "Dinner Sunday. Don't bail again." He typed back, "I'll be there." He wouldn't be. There was always something. A meeting, a problem, a fire to put out. Elena knew it, but she kept asking anyway, kept trying to pull him back into something that resembled a normal life. She didn't understand that normal had died the same night their father did, in this very office, with a bullet through his heart, and Victor's family ring torn from his finger. The ring. Victor's jaw tightened. It was a signet ring, white gold with the Kane family crest, a lion and a crown, engraved so finely you could see every detail. His grandfather had brought it from Ireland, and his father had worn it every day of his life. The night of the murder, it vanished. No witnesses, no leads, just blood on the carpet, and a missing ring that meant more than its weight in metal. Victor had turned the city inside out looking for it. He'd broken bones, burned buildings, buried men alive in shallow graves outside the city limits. Nothing. The ring was gone, and with it, the last piece of his father he could hold. He walked to the window again, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Below, Chicago moved through the rain, cars cutting through puddles, people hunched under umbrellas, the L train rattling past on elevated tracks. Somewhere down there, someone knew what happened. Someone had taken the ring, and when Victor found them, he would make sure they understood the cost of stealing from a Kane. The lighter was back in his hand, turning. The rain drummed on. 3 blocks away, in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and died more often than they stayed lit, a little girl named Iris stood outside a bakery with her mother's hand clutched in hers. The rain soaked through their thin jackets, and Iris's stomach felt like it was eating itself from the inside. She was 7 years old, small for her age, with tangled brown hair and eyes too large in her pale face. Her mother, Anna, swayed slightly beside her, sick with something the free clinic couldn't name without tests they couldn't afford. "Mommy hasn't eaten," Iris whispered, looking up at the bakery window where day-old loaves sat in a basket marked half price. Even half price was too much. Can you share expired bread? The words came out small and shaky, directed at a woman leaving the shop with a bag full of fresh rolls. The woman glanced down, startled, then hurried past without answering. Iris felt her mother's hand tighten, a silent apology. "It's okay, baby," Anna murmured, her voice thin. "We'll find something." But Iris knew they wouldn't. They'd been looking for 3 days, ever since the last of their money ran out, and the landlord changed the locks. They'd slept in a shelter the first night, a bus stop the second, and tonight, they had nowhere at all. The rain was cold, and her mother's hand was colder. On Iris's finger, too large and wrapped with dirty string to keep it from sliding off, was a ring, white gold, heavy, with a lion and a crown carved into its face. She didn't know where it came from. Her mother had pressed it into her hand 2 days ago, whispering that it was important, that Iris had to keep it safe. Anna's eyes had been fever-bright and unfocused, and Iris hadn't understood, but she'd nodded and tied the string and promised. Now, standing in the rain outside a bakery in Chicago, the ring caught the light from the shop window and gleamed. Inside, Victor Kane's phone buzzed again. A different message, this time from one of his street-level runners. "Boss, you need to see this. Girl with your ring. Corner of Ashland and Division. Now." Victor's heart stopped, then kicked into overdrive. He grabbed his coat and was out the door before the phone stopped vibrating. Marcus scrambling to follow. The rain didn't matter. The city didn't matter. Only the ring, and the answer it would finally give him. Everything was about to change. Victor's black SUV cut through the rain-slicked streets like a blade. Marcus at the wheel, silent and tense. The windshield wipers beat a frantic rhythm, but Victor barely heard them over the roar of blood in his ears. 3 years. 3 years of hunting, of tearing apart every lead, every whisper, every shadow that might hold the truth about his father's murder. And now, a text message, a street corner, a girl with his ring. "Faster," Victor said, his voice low and tight. Marcus pressed the accelerator, and the SUV surged forward, weaving through traffic with the kind of aggressive precision that made other drivers honk and swerve. Victor didn't care. His hand was clenched around his phone, the screen still glowing with the message and a grainy photo attached. A small hand, a ring too big, string wrapped around a thin finger. The crest was unmistakable. His father's ring. His ring. They reached Ashland and Division in under 10 minutes. The neighborhood was a patchwork of struggling businesses and boarded-up storefronts, the kind of place where people kept their heads down and didn't ask questions. Victor was out of the SUV before it fully stopped, rain immediately soaking through his coat. He scanned the street, eyes sharp, predatory. There, outside a bakery with a flickering neon sign, 2 figures huddled against the brick wall. A woman, thin and shaking, and a child, small and drenched, holding the woman's hand. The girl looked up as Victor approached, and her eyes went wide with fear. Victor stopped 3 feet away, towering over them. Water ran down his face, but he didn't blink, didn't move. His gaze locked onto the girl's hand, and there it was, the ring, wrapped with dirty string, too large for her tiny finger, but unmistakably his. The lion and crown caught the streetlight, and for a moment, Victor couldn't breathe. "Where did you get that?" His voice was a blade, sharp and cold. The girl flinched, pressing closer to her mother. The woman, Anna, tried to straighten, tried to put herself between Victor and her daughter, but she was too weak, too sick. She swayed, and Victor saw the fever in her eyes, the pallor of her skin. "Please," Anna whispered, her voice cracking. "Please don't hurt her. She didn't steal it. I found it. I swear. Found it." Victor's tone was flat, disbelieving. He took a step closer, and Marcus moved up beside him, a silent wall of muscle and threat. "You found a ring worth $500,000. You found the ring that was taken from my father's dead body. You found it." Anna's face crumpled, tears mixing with the rain. I didn't know whose it was. We needed money, and I thought." "Where?" Victor's voice cracked like a whip. "Where did you find it?" "In a pawn shop," Anna sobbed. "On Cicero Avenue, 3 months ago. The owner said it was unclaimed, that I could have it for $20 if I cleaned his shop for a week. I thought I could sell it, but then I got sick, and I couldn't." Victor's mind raced. A pawn shop. Cicero Avenue. That was West Side territory, neutral ground where his family's reach was thin. Someone had pawned the ring, which meant someone had been stupid enough, or desperate enough, to try to turn it into cash. That someone had just made the last mistake of their life. But first, the girl. Victor's gaze dropped to Iris, who was staring up at him with those two large eyes, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She couldn't be more than 7, skinny and pale, with bruises on her knees and dirt under her nails. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "Give me the ring," Victor said, his voice softer but no less commanding. Iris's hand tightened into a fist, clutching the ring. "Mommy said to keep it safe." "Iris, baby." "Give it to him," Anna pleaded, but the girl shook her head, stubborn despite her fear. "Mommy said it's important." Victor felt something twist in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation that took him a moment to recognize. It wasn't anger. It was something else, something he hadn't felt in years. He crouched down, bringing himself to the girl's eye level, and the movement made Marcus tense, ready to intervene if needed. "It is important," Victor said quietly, holding the girl's gaze. "It belonged to my father. He's gone now, and that ring is all I have left of him. Do you understand?" Iris stared at him, her lower lip trembling. Slowly, she nodded. "I need it back," Victor continued, his voice steady. "But I'll make you a deal. You give me the ring, and I'll make sure you and your mother have a place to sleep tonight. Food, medicine, whatever you need." "Victor," Marcus murmured, a warning. Victor ignored him. He kept his eyes on the girl, waiting. The rain poured down, and the city hummed around them, indifferent to the small drama playing out on a forgotten street corner. Iris looked at her mother, who nodded weakly, and then back at Victor. Slowly, carefully, she unwrapped the string from her finger and held out the ring. Her hand shook, but she didn't drop it. Victor took the ring, and the moment his fingers closed around it, the world seemed to tilt. The weight of it, the feel of the engraved metal, the ghost of his father's presence, it all came rushing back. He stood, slipping the ring into his pocket, and for a second he just stood there, breathing. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need a car at Ashland and Division. 2 passengers. Take them to the Lexington, suite on the 5th floor. Get a doctor up there within the hour." He paused, listening, then added, "And send someone to the pawn shop on Cicero. I want the owner in the warehouse by midnight. Alive." He ended the call and looked down at Anna and Iris. "A car will be here in 5 minutes. You'll be taken care of." Anna stared at him, disbelief and hope warring on her face. Why? Victor didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but it was buried too deep to articulate. He just shook his head and turned away, Marcus falling into step beside him. "You're going soft," Marcus said once they were back in the SUV. Victor didn't respond. He pulled the ring from his pocket and stared at it, the lion and crown gleaming in the dim light. Somewhere in this city, the man who killed his father was still breathing. But now, Victor had a thread to pull, a lead to follow. And he would follow it all the way to the end, no matter where it led or who got burned along the way. Behind them, a black sedan pulled up to the curb, and a man in a suit stepped out, opening the door for Anna and Iris. The girl looked back once, her eyes finding Victor's through the rain, and then she was gone, swallowed by the warmth and safety of the car. Victor watched until the sedan disappeared around the corner. Then he slipped the ring onto his finger, where it belonged, and felt the weight of his father's legacy settle back into place. The rain drummed on. The city waited, and Victor Kane, for the first time in 3 years, felt something close to hope. The warehouse on the south side smelled of rust and old blood, a scent Victor had long since stopped noticing. It was one of several properties his family owned, places that existed off the books, where questions were asked and answers were extracted. Tonight, the space was lit by a single hanging bulb that swung slightly in the draft, casting shadows that danced across the concrete floor. Victor stood with his arms crossed, the ring now back on his finger where it belonged, heavy and familiar. Marcus was beside him, silent as always, and 2 of Victor's men flanked the door. In the center of the room, tied to a metal chair, was the pawn shop owner, a man named Lenny Kozlowski, mid-50s, balding, with the kind of nervous energy that came from a lifetime of cutting corners and looking over his shoulder. Lenny was sweating despite the cold, his eyes darting between Victor and the door, calculating his odds. They weren't good. "Lenny," Victor said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. You've been in business a long time. Cicero Avenue, right? Family shop? Lenny swallowed hard. Yeah. My old man started it. I just run it now. I don't want trouble, Mr. Kane. I swear. I didn't know. Didn't know what? Victor interrupted, stepping closer. The light caught the ring on his finger, and Lenny's eyes locked onto it, recognition and fear flooding his face. Didn't know you were selling stolen property? Didn't know this ring was taken from a murder scene? Or didn't know it belonged to me? I didn't. I swear, man. I didn't know it was yours. Lenny's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. Some guy brought it in, said he needed cash fast. I gave him $200. Figured I could flip it for more. That's it. That's all I know. Victor crouched down, bringing himself eye level with Lenny, the same way he'd done with the little girl hours earlier. But there was no softness now, no deal to be made. Describe him. Lenny's breath came in short gasps. White guy, maybe 40, 45, brown hair, kinda thin. Had a scar here. He gestured to his left cheek. Real jittery, like he was on something. Didn't give a name. When? 3 months ago, maybe a little more. I wrote it down in the ledger, but I don't remember the exact date. Victor straightened, nodding to Marcus, who pulled out his phone and made a call. Within minutes, someone would be at the pawn shop, tearing through Lenny's records, pulling security footage if it still existed. Every detail mattered now. This man, Victor said, his tone measured. Did he say anything? Where he got the ring? Why he needed the money? Lenny shook his head frantically. No, man, nothing. He wanted cash, no questions. That's how it works, you know? I don't ask, they don't tell. Victor studied him, reading the fear, the truth buried in the panic. Lenny was small time, a middleman who'd stumbled into something bigger than he could handle. He wasn't the killer, but he was a link in the chain, and Victor would follow that chain until it led him to the man who'd pulled the trigger. You're going to stay here tonight, Victor said, straightening. My men will make sure you're comfortable. Tomorrow you're going to go through every transaction you've made in the last 5 years. Every face you remember, every name you wrote down. And if you're lying to me, Lenny, if you're holding anything back, I'll know. And then we'll have a very different conversation. Lenny nodded so hard his chin hit his chest. Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Kane. Whatever you need. Victor turned and walked toward the door, Marcus following. Behind them, Lenny sagged in the chair, relief and terror warring on his face. One of the guards moved forward, untying him but keeping a firm grip on his arm. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the streetlights. Victor stood on the loading dock, breathing in the cold night air, his mind already racing ahead. A man with a scar, jittery, desperate. Someone who'd been close enough to his father to take the ring, or someone who'd bought it from the killer. Either way, it was more than Victor had in 3 years. We'll find him, Marcus said quietly. Victor nodded, but his thoughts had already shifted to something else. The girl, Iris, and her mother. He'd sent them to the Lexington, one of the hotels his family owned, a place where they'd be safe and cared for. It was an impulse, a decision made in the moment, and Victor didn't do impulses. Everything he did was calculated, controlled, but something about the girl's eyes, the way she'd clutched that ring like it was the only thing in the world that mattered, had gotten under his skin. Check on them, Victor said. The woman and the girl. Make sure the doctor saw them, that they have what they need. Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. I'll send someone. No. Victor's voice was firm. I want you to check, personally. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. They drove back to the loop in silence, the city sliding past the windows in a blur of lights and shadows. Victor's phone buzzed with updates. Security footage from the pawn shop was being pulled. Facial recognition software was running, and his network of informants was being activated. The man with the scar would surface. It was only a matter of time. But as they pulled up to the building, Victor's thoughts drifted back to the warehouse, to his father's office, to the night everything changed. He remembered the sound of the gunshot, the way his father had looked at him with surprise and something else. Regret, maybe, or a warning. Victor had been 28 then, already deep in the family business but not yet in charge. His father's death had thrust him into power, and he'd taken it with both hands, ruthless and unyielding. But the ring had haunted him. It was more than a symbol. It was a connection, a piece of his father that he couldn't let go. And now that he had it back, The weight of it on his finger felt like both a victory and a burden. Marcus's phone rang, and he answered, listened, then glanced at Victor. The girl and her mother are settled. Doctor says the woman has pneumonia, but it's treatable. He started her on antibiotics. The girl's malnourished, but otherwise okay. Victor nodded, a tightness in his chest easing slightly. Good. Victor, Marcus said carefully. Why are we doing this? They're nobody. The ring is back. We have a lead. Why keep them around? Victor didn't answer right away. He stared out at the city, at the lights reflecting off the wet pavement, and thought about the girl's hand, small and shaking, holding out the ring. Thought about her mother, sick and desperate, trying to protect her daughter, even when she had nothing left. Because they didn't have to give it back, Victor said finally. They could have run, could have sold it, but they didn't. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You think they're honest? I think they're survivors, Victor corrected, and I respect that. He got out of the SUV and headed into the building, Marcus trailing behind. The elevator ride up to his penthouse was silent, and when Victor stepped into his office, the first thing he did was pour another whiskey. He stood at the window again, the ring catching the light, and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd set in motion. Somewhere in Chicago, a man with a scar was living his life, thinking he'd gotten away with murder. But Victor was coming for him now, and when he found him, there would be no mercy, no second chances. The rain had stopped, but the storm was just beginning. 3 days later, Victor sat in his office, staring at a photograph on his desk. It was grainy, pulled from the pawn shop's security footage, but clear enough. A man in his 40s, thin face, brown hair, and a jagged scar running down his left cheek. The timestamp read 3 months and 2 weeks ago, just days after his father's murder. Victor had seen a lot of faces in his line of work, but this one was new. His network had run the image through every database they had access to, legal and otherwise, and come up empty. No name, no record, no trail. The man was a ghost, except ghosts didn't pawn stolen rings. Marcus stood by the window, arms crossed, his expression grim. We've shown the photo to every informant we have. Nobody recognizes him. Either he's not from Chicago, or he's been very careful. Or someone's protecting him, Victor said, his voice low. The thought had been eating at him for days. His father's murder had always felt too clean, too professional. No witnesses, no evidence, no leads. And now, a man who didn't exist in any system had somehow gotten close enough to take the ring. It didn't add up unless someone on the inside had helped. Victor's jaw tightened. Betrayal was a knife that cut deeper than any bullet. And if someone in his organization had sold out his father, they would pay in ways that made death look like mercy. I want everyone questioned again, Victor said, his tone hard. Everyone who was in this building the night my father died. I don't care if they've been with us for 20 years. I want to know where they were, who they talked to, what they saw. Marcus nodded. I'll handle it. And find out who else had access to the office. Cleaning staff, security, anyone. Victor, Marcus said carefully. If we start tearing into our own people, it's going to create problems. Loyalty is built on trust. If they think you suspect them. I don't care, Victor interrupted, his voice cold. My father is dead, and someone in this organization knows why. I'll burn it all down if I have to. Marcus held his gaze for a moment, then nodded again. Yes, sir. After Marcus left, Victor sat alone in the silence, the photograph still in his hand. He felt the walls closing in, the weight of the empire pressing down on him. For 3 years, he'd held it together, kept the family business running, kept the enemies at bay. But the cracks were starting to show, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep pretending he had control. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. You missed dinner again. Call me. He didn't call. Instead, he poured another drink and walked to the window, staring out at the city that had taken everything from him. The ring on his finger felt heavier than ever, a reminder of what he'd lost and what he still had to find. The next morning, Victor made an unexpected decision. He drove to the Lexington Hotel, where Iris and her mother were staying, and took the elevator to the 5th floor. He didn't know why he was going, didn't have a reason that made sense. But something pulled him there, a need to see them, to confirm they were real and safe. He knocked on the door, and after a moment it opened. Anna stood there, looking better than she had on the street. Cleaner, healthier, though still pale and thin. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Mr. Kane, she said, surprise and wariness in her voice. "I wanted to check on you," Victor said, his tone neutral. "Make sure the doctor came." Anna nodded, stepping back to let him in. The suite was modest but comfortable, with a small living area and a bedroom visible through an open door. Iris sat on the couch, coloring in a book that someone, probably Marcus, had brought her. She looked up when Victor entered, and her face lit up with a shy smile. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," Victor replied, and felt something in his chest shift. Anna gestured to the couch. "Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine," Victor said, but he sat anyway, his eyes on the girl. She went back to her coloring, her small hand moving the crayon carefully across the page. The picture was of a house with a garden, bright and hopeful. "Thank you," Anna said quietly, sitting across from him, "for all of this. I don't know why you're helping us, but thank you." Victor didn't respond right away. He watched Iris color, watched the concentration on her face, and thought about the ring, about his father, about the man with the scar who'd set all of this in motion. "The ring," Victor said finally. "You said you found it in a pawn shop. Did the owner say anything else? Anything about the man who brought it in?" Anna frowned, thinking. "Not really. Just that he seemed desperate." "Why?" "I'm looking for him," Victor said simply. Anna's expression darkened. "He hurt you, didn't he? That's why the ring matters so much." Victor met her gaze, and for a moment, he considered lying. But something about her, maybe the honesty in her eyes, maybe the fact that she'd given back the ring when she could have run, made him tell the truth. "He killed my father," Victor said quietly, "and I'm going to find him." Anna's breath caught, and she glanced at Iris, who was still coloring, oblivious. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." "You couldn't have," Victor said. He stood, suddenly feeling out of place, like he'd crossed a line he didn't know existed. "I should go." "Wait," Anna said, standing too. "If there's anything I can do, anything to help." Victor shook his head. "You've done enough. Just focus on getting better." He moved toward the door, but Iris's voice stopped him. "Mr. Kane?" He turned. The girl was standing now, holding the coloring book. "Are you sad?" The question hit him like a punch. Victor stared at her, this small, fragile child who'd been through more than most adults, and didn't know how to answer. "Sometimes," he said finally. Iris walked over and held out the coloring book. "You can have this. It makes me feel better when I'm sad." Victor looked down at the picture, the house, the garden, the bright colors, and felt something crack inside him. He crouched down, taking the book gently. "Thank you, Iris." She smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, Victor felt something other than anger and grief. It was small, fragile, but it was there. He left the hotel with the coloring book tucked under his arm, and when he got back to his office, he set it on his desk next to the photograph of the man with the scar. 2 images side by side, one of violence and vengeance, the other of innocence and hope. Victor stared at them for a long time, and then he made a call. "Marcus, I want every resource we have on this. I don't care what it costs. Find him." The hunt was on, and Victor Kane would not stop until he had his answers. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a new thought had taken root, a question he couldn't quite shake. What would his father think of the man he'd become? The break came on a Tuesday, just after midnight. Victor was in his office, the coloring book still on his desk beside the photograph, when Marcus burst through the door without knocking. His face was flushed, his eyes bright with urgency. "We found him," Marcus said, breathless. "The man with the scar. His name is Danny Reeves. Small-time enforcer. Worked for the Italians 5 years ago before he went freelance. He's been laying low on the north side, but one of our guys spotted him at a bar in Uptown." Victor was on his feet before Marcus finished speaking. "Is he still there? Our guy's watching him. Reeves is drunk, alone. We can take him now." Victor grabbed his coat, adrenaline surging through his veins. 3 years. 3 years of searching, of dead ends and cold trails. And now, finally, the man who'd killed his father was within reach. He didn't let himself think about what would happen next, didn't let himself feel anything but the cold, focused determination that had kept him alive this long. They took 2 cars, Victor and Marcus in the lead, 4 of Victor's best men in the second. The drive to Uptown took 20 minutes, the streets quiet and empty at this hour. The bar was a dive, the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and everybody minded their own business, perfect for a man trying to disappear. Victor's man, a wiry kid named Tommy, was waiting outside. "He's still in there," Tommy said, nodding toward the door. "Back booth, nursing a beer. Hasn't moved in an hour." Victor didn't hesitate. He pushed through the door, Marcus and the others fanning out behind him. The bar was dim, smelling of stale beer and cigarette smoke, with a handful of patrons scattered at the counter and tables. None of them looked up as Victor walked in, their eyes carefully averted. In the back booth, slumped against the worn vinyl, was Danny Reeves. He looked exactly like the photograph. Thin face, brown hair, the scar cutting down his left cheek like a brand. His eyes were half closed, his hand wrapped around a beer bottle, and he didn't notice Victor until it was too late. Victor slid into the booth across from him, and Danny's eyes snapped open, confusion giving way to fear as he recognized the man staring at him. He tried to stand, but Marcus was already there, a hand on his shoulder, pressing him back down. "Danny Reeves," Victor said, his voice calm, almost conversational. "We need to talk." Danny's face went pale. "I don't know you, man. You pawned a ring 3 months ago," Victor interrupted. "White gold, family crest. You remember that?" Danny's mouth opened, closed, opened again. His eyes darted to the door, calculating, but there was nowhere to run. Victor's men had the exits covered, and the other patrons were already leaving, sensing the danger. "I don't know what you're talking about," Danny stammered, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Victor leaned forward, his gaze locked on Danny's. "That ring belonged to my father. You took it the night you killed him. And now, you're going to tell me why." Danny shook his head frantically. "I didn't kill nobody. I swear, man, I found the ring, okay? Someone gave it to me, said I could keep it if I got rid of it quiet. That's all I know." "Who?" Victor's voice was a blade, sharp and unforgiving. "I don't know his name. He didn't tell me." Victor's hand shot out, grabbing Danny by the collar and slamming him back against the booth. The beer bottle fell, shattering on the floor, and Danny let out a choked gasp. "You're lying." "I'm not. I swear I'm not." Danny's eyes were wild, desperate. He found me, said he needed someone to move the ring, no questions. Gave me $500 and told me to forget I ever saw him. That's it, man, that's all I know." Victor held him there, his grip tight, his mind racing. If Danny was telling the truth, and the fear in his eyes suggested he was, then someone else had killed his father. Someone who'd used Danny as a middleman, a disposable pawn to cover their tracks. "Describe him," Victor said, his voice low and dangerous. Danny gasped for air, his hands clawing at Victor's wrist. Older guy, maybe 50, 60, gray hair, real put together, like a businessman. Had a nice suit, expensive watch, talked smooth, like he was used to giving orders. Victor's blood ran cold. The description was vague, but something about it nagged at him, a familiarity he couldn't place. He released Danny, who slumped forward, coughing and wheezing. "Where did you meet him?" Victor demanded. "A parking garage, downtown near the river. He called me, said he had a job. I showed up, he gave me the ring and the cash, and that was it. I never saw him again." Victor straightened, his mind spinning. A businessman, downtown, someone who knew how to cover their tracks, who had the resources to hire a middleman and disappear, someone close enough to his father to get into his office, to kill him, and take the ring without leaving a trace. Someone Victor knew. The realization hit him like a freight train, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. He turned to Marcus, who was watching him with a carefully neutral expression, and saw the truth in his eyes. The way Marcus had been so calm, so controlled, always one step ahead. The way he'd known exactly where to look, exactly what to say. "It was you?" Victor said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus didn't deny it. He just stood there, his face unreadable, and nodded slowly. "It was me." The bar seemed to tilt, the world narrowing to the space between them. Victor's hand went to his waistband, to the gun he always carried, but Marcus was faster. He pulled his own weapon, leveling it at Victor's chest. "I didn't want it to come to this," Marcus said quietly, "but your father was going to ruin everything. He wanted out, wanted to go legitimate. Do you know what that would have done to us? To the family? We would have been destroyed." Victor's vision blurred with rage. "So you killed him." "I saved us," Marcus corrected, "and I've been protecting you ever since, keeping the business running, keeping you alive. You think you've been in charge these last 3 years? You've been a figurehead, Victor. I've been the one making the real decisions. Victor's hand tightened on his gun, but he didn't draw it. Not yet. Why take the ring? Because it was evidence, Marcus said simply. Your father fought back. The ring came off in the struggle. I couldn't leave it there. And now? Victor's voice was cold, deadly. Now, you have a choice, Marcus said. You can try to kill me, and we both die here. Or you can walk away, let this go, and we keep building what your father started. What I've been building. Victor stared at him. The man who'd served his family for 20 years, who'd stood beside him through every battle, every loss. The man who'd murdered his father in cold blood. There's no choice, Victor said, and drew his gun. The shots rang out simultaneously, echoing through the empty bar. Victor felt the impact, a burning pain in his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He fired again, and again, until Marcus crumpled to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Victor stood there, swaying, his gun still raised, and looked down at the man who'd betrayed him. Marcus's eyes were open, staring at nothing, and Victor felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just emptiness. Tommy and the others rushed in, their voices a blur of noise and urgency. Someone was calling for a doctor. Someone else was checking Marcus's body. Victor let them take the gun from his hand, let them guide him to a chair, and closed his eyes. It was over, but the cost had been everything. Victor woke in a hospital bed, the smell of antiseptic sharp in his nose. His shoulder throbbed, bandaged and immobilized, and for a moment, he didn't remember where he was, or how he'd gotten there. Then it all came rushing back. The bar, Danny Reeves, Marcus's confession, the gunfire. He tried to sit up, but a hand on his chest stopped him. Elena was there, her face pale and tear-streaked, her eyes red from crying. Don't, she said softly. You need to rest. Marcus, Victor said, his voice hoarse. Dead, Elena confirmed. The police are calling it self-defense. They found Danny Reeves' statement, the evidence. You're clear. Victor closed his eyes, the weight of it all pressing down on him. Marcus was gone. His father's killer was dead, but the victory felt hollow, a Pyrrhic triumph that left him more broken than before. What happens now? Elena asked quietly. Victor didn't have an answer. He'd spent 3 years hunting for the truth, and now that he had it, he didn't know what to do with it. The empire his father had built, the empire Marcus had tried to steal, was still there, waiting for him. But Victor didn't know if he wanted it anymore. I need to see them, Victor said suddenly. Elena frowned. Who? The girl, Iris, and her mother. Elena's expression softened. Victor, you've been shot. I need to see them, Victor repeated, his voice firm. Elena sighed but didn't argue. She helped him into a wheelchair, and together they made their way to the Lexington Hotel. The suite was the same as before, but when Anna opened the door, her face lit up with relief. Mr. Kane, she said, her eyes going to the bandage on his shoulder. Are you all right? I'm fine, Victor said, though it was a lie. He looked past her to where Iris sat on the couch, the coloring book open in front of her. When she saw him, she jumped up and ran over, her small face full of concern. You're hurt, she said, her voice trembling. I'll be okay, Victor said, and found that he meant it. Anna invited them in, and for the next hour, Victor sat with them, talking about nothing and everything. Iris showed him her drawings, Anna made tea, and for the first time in 3 years, Victor felt something close to peace. When it was time to leave, Iris walked him to the door. Are you still sad? She asked. Victor looked down at her, this small girl who'd given him back more than just a ring, and smiled. A little, but I'm getting better. Iris hugged him, her arms barely reaching around his waist, and Victor felt the last of the ice around his heart begin to thaw. Over the next few months, Victor made changes. He stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the family business, appointing trusted people to handle what he no longer wanted to touch. He started the process his father had wanted, going legitimate, cleaning up the empire, turning it into something that didn't require blood and fear to survive. It wasn't easy. There were fights, betrayals, losses, but Victor held on, driven by a promise he'd made to himself and to the memory of his father. He also made sure Anna and Iris were taken care of. He set them up in a small house in a safe neighborhood, paid for Anna's medical bills, and enrolled Iris in a good school. He visited them often, and slowly, they became something he'd never expected. Family. One evening, As Victor stood in his office, looking out at the city that had taken so much from him, he felt the ring on his finger and thought about his father, about the man he'd been, the man he'd wanted to be, and the man Victor was becoming. The rain started again, soft and steady, and Victor smiled. It was a new beginning, a chance to build something better, and for the first time in 3 years, he believed it was possible. Outside, Chicago glowed in the twilight, the lights reflecting off the wet streets, and Victor Kane, the man who'd lost everything, finally found his way home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another tale. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know what you thought of Victor's journey and tell me where in the world you're listening from. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon. Until next time, take care.